You know that feeling when you walk into a room and immediately sense something's off? Like the air itself is holding its breath, waiting for something terrible to happen. That's exactly how I felt the moment I stepped into my father's house that Thanksgiving. But I ignored it. God, I wish I hadn't ignored it. My name is Sarah, and I'm 32 years old. The story I'm about to tell you happened last year, and honestly, I'm still processing it. Still waking up some mornings wondering if it was all just a nightmare. But it wasn't, it was real. And it changed everything. Let me back up a little because you need to understand how I got here. My mom died when I was 15, cancer. The aggressive kind that doesn't give you time to prepare, doesn't give you time to say all the things you need to say. One day she was complaining about being tired, and 6 months later she was gone. My dad, Richard, completely fell apart. I mean completely. He'd sit in the dark for hours, wouldn't eat, wouldn't talk. I was grieving too, but I also felt like I had to be the strong one. I had to keep our little family of two afloat. For 3 years, it was just us. We figured it out together. Burned dinners, forgot to do laundry, cried at random commercials that reminded us of her. But we were healing, slowly, together. Then he met Patricia. I was 18, about to head off to college, when Dad sat me down with this nervous energy I hadn't seen since Mom's funeral. He told me he'd met someone, a woman named Patricia, at his company's regional conference. He was blushing like a teenager, and part of me was actually happy for him. I didn't want him to be alone forever, you know, I wanted him to find joy again. Patricia seemed nice enough at first. She was polished, always dressed impeccably, smiled at the right times. She had 2 kids from her previous marriage, Brandon, who was 20 at the time, and Melissa, who was 16. Their father had apparently left them for his secretary. Classic story. Patricia painted herself as this devoted single mother who'd sacrificed everything for her children. Red flag number one, I didn't see it then. She never asked about my mother, not once. Not what she was like, not how we were coping, nothing. She just sort of moved into the space Mom left behind like it had been vacant and waiting for her. They got married 6 months later. I was away at college, studying finance, trying to build my own life. I came home for the wedding, smiled for the photos, danced with my dad. He looked happy. That's what I kept telling myself, he looked happy. But things started changing. Slowly at first, then all at once. Brandon and Melissa moved into our house. Well, their house now. My childhood bedroom got turned into Melissa's creative space for her photography. My mom's garden that Dad and I had maintained like a shrine, Patricia had it torn up and replaced with a koi pond because it was more feng shui. Photos of my mother started disappearing from the walls. When I asked Dad about it, he got defensive. Said Patricia felt uncomfortable with another woman's presence everywhere. He actually said that. About my dead mother. I swallowed it. Told myself I was being selfish. Dad deserved happiness, right? And I was an adult now, building my own life. I had graduated, landed a good job at a financial firm in Chicago, had my own apartment. I didn't need to cling to the past. But every time I visited, I felt more and more like a stranger in the home I grew up in. Patricia would make these little comments. "Oh, Sarah, you're visiting again. Don't you have friends in Chicago?" Or, "Richard, didn't you say Sarah was busy this weekend?" We already made plans with Brandon and Melissa. Nothing overtly hostile, just enough to make me feel unwelcome without being able to point to anything concrete. The worst part? Dad didn't see it. Or maybe he didn't want to see it. Brandon and Melissa treated the house like a hotel. Brandon was 26 by this point, still living at home, working part-time at some vape shop while pursuing his music career. Melissa had dropped out of college twice and was currently taking time to find herself. Meanwhile, Dad was paying for everything. Their car insurance, their credit cards, their entire lives. I tried to talk to him about it once. Suggested maybe they needed some tough love, some encouragement to launch. He got angry with me, told me I didn't understand because I didn't have children. That hit hard. I was his child, his actual daughter. But apparently, that didn't count anymore. Over the years, I watched Patricia systematically erase my mother's memory from that house and from my father's life. She got him to sell Mom's jewelry, said it was just sitting there collecting dust. She convinced him to donate Mom's clothes, her books, everything. When I asked if I could have some of Mom's things, Patricia said they'd already gotten rid of it all. "You were taking so long to decide, sweetie. We couldn't just let it sit there forever." I found out later she'd sold most of it. My mother's vintage Chanel bag that her mother had given her, sold on some consignment website. The handmade quilt my grandmother made for my parents' wedding, gone, but I kept trying. Kept showing up for holidays, kept calling Dad, kept pretending everything was fine because I didn't want to lose him completely. He was all I had left of my original family, which brings me to last Thanksgiving. I had been dating Jake for about 8 months at that point. He's a high school teacher, coaches basketball, genuinely one of the kindest humans I've ever met. He knew about my complicated family situation. I'd warned him, but he wanted to meet them, said it was important to him to know where I came from. I should have known something was wrong when Patricia called me 2 weeks before Thanksgiving with the invitation. She never called me. It was always Dad, and even then, I usually had to call him first. Sarah, darling, we'd love for you and your boyfriend to join us for Thanksgiving this year. It's going to be a big family gathering. Brandon's new girlfriend will be there, and Melissa's fiancé, too. It would mean so much to your father to have everyone together. The way she said, big family gathering should have tipped me off, but like an idiot, I was actually touched. I thought maybe, finally, Patricia was trying to include me. Maybe things were going to get better. Jake and I drove down Wednesday night. We stayed at a hotel because Patricia had claimed there was no room at the house with everyone staying over. Brandon's girlfriend apparently needed her own room because she got anxiety sleeping in unfamiliar places. Sure, whatever. Thursday morning, Jake and I showed up around 10 to help with preparations. When we walked in, the house was already full of people. Patricia's sister and her family, Patricia's mother, some cousins I'd never met. Brandon and his girlfriend Tiffany were camped out in the living room playing video games. Melissa and her fiancé Derek were sitting at the kitchen island while Patricia fussed over them. Dad was in the dining room setting the table. When he saw me, his face lit up. "Sarah, sweetheart." He came over and gave me a big hug, shook Jake's hand enthusiastically. For a moment, it felt normal. It felt like home. "Let me introduce you to everyone," Dad said, steering us toward the living room. The introductions were awkward. Patricia's family was polite but distant. They clearly had no idea who I was beyond Richard's daughter. Patricia's mother, Carol, looked me up and down like she was appraising livestock and found it lacking. "So you're the one from Richard's first marriage," Carol said. Not even a question. A statement, like I was a piece of furniture from his previous life. "My mother passed away when I was 15, I said, keeping my voice steady. "I'm their only child together." Carol made a humming sound that could have meant anything and turned back to Patricia. "Patricia, dear, do you need help with the sweet potato casserole?" Jake squeezed my hand. He'd already picked up on the vibe. I went to the kitchen to offer help. Patricia was in her element, directing traffic like a general. "Oh, Sarah, no need. Melissa and I have it all under control. Besides, you're a guest." The way she said guest made it clear I was just that. Not family, a guest. Melissa didn't even acknowledge me, just kept scrolling through her phone while Patricia did all the actual work. The thing about emotional abuse is that it's death by 1,000 paper cuts. No single moment is bad enough to call out, but they add up. They accumulate like poison in your system. Throughout the day, little things kept happening. Brandon's girlfriend, Tiffany, sat in what used to be my spot at the kitchen counter. When I went to move to another seat, Patricia said, "Oh, Sarah, actually, Aunt Linda usually sits there. Maybe you could sit in the living room." So I sat on the couch like a visitor in my childhood home. Dad was oblivious. He was so busy playing host, making sure everyone had drinks, laughing at Brandon's jokes, taking photos with Melissa and Derek. Every time he passed me, he'd pat my shoulder or smile, but he never stopped to actually talk to me. Never noticed that his wife and her family were treating me like an outsider. Jake noticed, though. "This is messed up, Sarah," he whispered to me at one point. "Your dad doesn't see how they're treating you." I didn't have an answer for him. Dinner was called for 3 o'clock. The dining room table was set beautifully. Patricia always did know how to throw a party. There were place cards at each setting. I found mine and Jake's at the far end of the table, next to Patricia's teenage nephew who spent the entire meal watching TikToks under the table. Dad sat at the head of the table, with Patricia to his right. Brandon and Tiffany, Melissa and Derek, Patricia's sister and her family, all clustered around them. I was so far down I could barely hear the conversation. The meal was delicious. I'll give Patricia that. Turkey perfectly cooked, all the traditional sides. But I could barely taste anything. I kept watching my dad at the other end of the table, laughing with Brandon, complimenting Melissa's engagement ring, playing the role of perfect father to Patricia's children while his actual daughter sat at the kids' end of the table. Jake was getting angrier by the minute. I could see it in the set of his jaw, the way he gripped his fork. But he kept quiet, for my sake. After dinner, Dad stood up with his wine glass to make a toast. This was tradition. He always gave thanks before dessert. I actually felt myself relax a little. This was familiar, this was something from before. I want to thank everyone for being here today, Dad started, his voice warm and full. Family is everything. It's what gets us through the hard times and makes the good times better. I'm so grateful to have all of you in my life. He looked around the table, his gaze sweeping over Patricia, Brandon, Melissa. It paused on me for a second and he smiled. Then he sat down. That was it. No personal mention of me, his only biological child, just a generic statement that could have been about anyone. Patricia stood up next. She had that same smile she always wore, perfectly pleasant, perfectly fake. I want to add something, she said, her voice carrying that sweetness that always made my teeth hurt. This family has been through so much. We've blended, we've grown, we've changed. And I think it's important that we're honest about who we are now. My stomach dropped. I don't know why, but I felt it. Something was coming. Patricia looked directly at me, still smiling. Richard and I have been talking a lot lately about what family means, about who belongs at this table, about who shares our values and our vision for the future. She paused for effect. I could see Dad looking up at her, confused but not alarmed, not yet. So we took a vote. Richard, Brandon, Melissa, and myself. We voted on who is truly part of this family. Who deserves to be included in our holidays, our celebrations, our lives. My hands started shaking. Jake grabbed one under the table. And Sarah, Patricia's smile widened. We voted, and you're not family anymore. The words hung in the air like smoke. For a second I thought I'd misheard. The room was completely silent. Even the teenager next to me had looked up from his phone. What? The word barely made it out of my mouth. You're not family, Patricia repeated, slower this time, like she was explaining something to a child. You don't share our values. You're never here, you've made it clear you don't approve of how we live our lives. You judge Brandon and Melissa, you make Richard feel guilty about moving on from his past. We don't need that negativity. So we voted, and the family has decided that you're no longer welcome at family events. I looked at my father. He was staring at his plate, his face red. But he wasn't saying anything. He wasn't defending me, he wasn't standing up, he was just sitting there. Dad, my voice cracked. Dad, what is she talking about? He finally looked up at me and I saw it in his eyes. Guilt, shame, but also resignation. He'd known this was coming, he'd been part of it. Sarah, sweetie, I think maybe Patricia has a point. You've been distant. You only visit a few times a year. You don't really make an effort with Brandon and Melissa. Because they're not my siblings. The words exploded out of me. Dad, I'm your daughter, your only daughter, Mom's daughter, how can you let her do this? Don't bring your mother into this, Patricia snapped, her pleasant facade cracking. That's exactly the problem, you're stuck in the past. Richard has a new family now, new priorities, and quite frankly, you're not one of them. I felt like I was drowning, like the air had been sucked out of the room. All these people were staring at me, some looked uncomfortable, some looked curious. Some, like Brandon, looked smug. Jake stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. This is insane, you people are insane. Young man, this is a family matter, Patricia said coldly. She is family, Jake shouted. She's his daughter, what the hell is wrong with you people? Dad finally stood up. Jake, I think you should calm down, calm down. You just let your wife tell your daughter she's not family anymore and you want me to calm down. Jake was shaking with rage. Sarah, we're leaving now, but I couldn't move. I was staring at my father, waiting for him to say something, waiting for him to tell Patricia she was wrong, waiting for him to be my dad. He didn't. Sarah, he said quietly, maybe it's best if you go. Let's let things cool down, we can talk about this later. And that's when something inside me broke, not shattered, broke. Clean in half, I stood up. My legs felt like water, but I stood up. Jake was immediately at my side, his hand on my back. You know what? My voice was surprisingly steady. You're absolutely right, Patricia, I'm not part of this family, because this, I gestured around the table. This isn't a family, this is a cult. A cult where you've brainwashed my father into erasing his entire life before you, into forgetting the woman he was married to for 20 years, into abandoning his only child. Sarah, don't be dramatic, Dad started. Dramatic, I laughed, and it sounded slightly unhinged even to my own ears. Dad, she just held a vote to kick me out of the family, and I'm being dramatic. Did you vote yes? Did you actually vote to disown your own daughter? The silence was my answer. Wow, okay. I nodded slowly, tears finally starting to stream down my face. Okay, good to know. Good to know where I stand. Good to know that 28 years of being your daughter, of losing mom with you, of being there through everything, all of that means less than 3 years with Patricia and her leeches. Hey, Brandon stood up. Don't talk about my mom like that. Sit down, Brandon, I snapped. Adults are talking. Oh, wait, you wouldn't know about that, would you, being an adult? Since you're 26 years old and still living off my father while contributing absolutely nothing. That's enough. Patricia's voice was sharp now. Richard, tell her to leave. And my father, the man who used to scare away my nightmares, who taught me to ride a bike, who held me while I sobbed at my mother's funeral, looked at me and said, Sarah, I think you should go. I felt Jake's arm around me, guiding me toward the door. I was moving, but I didn't remember deciding to move. It was like my body was on autopilot while my brain tried to process what had just happened. We were at the front door when I turned back one last time. Dad was standing in the dining room doorway, and for a second, just a second, I thought I saw regret on his face. I hope she's worth it, Dad, I said softly. I hope Patricia and her kids are worth losing your real daughter, because that's what's happening here. You're not just pushing me away, you're losing me, forever. Sarah, don't be like that. No, Dad, you made your choice. You literally voted on it. So now you get to live with it. Don't call me. Don't show up at my apartment. Don't pretend you care about me at Christmas or my birthday or any other day. You're not my family anymore either. And then Jake and I walked out into the cold November evening, and I left my father's house for the last time. The drive back to the hotel was silent except for my crying. Jake didn't try to make me stop or tell me it would be okay. He just drove, one hand on the wheel and one holding mine, and let me fall apart. When we got back to the room, I completely lost it. I'm talking ugly crying, hyperventilating, the whole 9 yards. All the years of swallowing Patricia's little cruelties, of watching my mother's memory get erased, of feeling like a stranger in my own family, it all came pouring out. Jake held me on the bathroom floor while I sobbed, didn't say anything, just held me. After what felt like hours, I finally calmed down enough to talk. I can't believe he just let her do that, I whispered. He didn't even try to defend me. I know, baby, I know. She voted me out of the family like I'm on some reality TV show, and he went along with it. He voted against me, Jake. He's a coward, Jake said bluntly. And she's manipulative. She's been isolating him from you for years. This was just the final step. But he's my dad. He's supposed to protect me. He's supposed to love me no matter what. He should, you're right. And the fact that he's not doing that says everything about him and nothing about you. We stayed in that hotel room through Friday. I couldn't face the drive home yet. My phone kept ringing. Dad called 6 times, I didn't answer. He left voicemails, I deleted them without listening. Patricia actually had the audacity to text me, I hope you realize your outburst ruined Thanksgiving for everyone. Very selfish, Sarah. I blocked her number. By Saturday, the shock was wearing off and rage was setting in. The kind of cold, calculating rage that makes you dangerous. I'd spent my whole adult life trying to maintain a relationship with my father, trying to fit into Patricia's vision of a family, trying to be small and unobtrusive and easy. And this was what I got. A Thanksgiving dinner ambush and a family vote. I want to fight back, I told Jake on Saturday morning. We were sitting in a Denny's, picking at pancakes neither of us really wanted. What do you mean? I mean, I'm not going to just slink away quietly. I'm not going to let Patricia win. She wants me gone, fine, but I'm going to make damn sure my father understands exactly what he's losing. Jake studied me for a moment. Okay, what's the plan? And that's when I started thinking, really thinking. See, here's the thing about my father. He's not a bad person at his core. He's weak, he's easily influenced, and he's desperately afraid of being alone. Patricia knew that. She exploited it, but there was still a part of him I had to believe this, that loved me. That remembered my mother. That felt guilty about what he'd done. I just needed to remind him. Over the next few weeks, I started executing my plan. First, I reached out to my father's older sister, Aunt Jean. She lived in Seattle and wasn't particularly close to my dad, but they still talked a few times a year. I called her and told her everything. Not just about Thanksgiving, but about the years of Patricia slowly erasing my mother's memory. isolating my father, manipulating him. Aunt Jean was horrified. Sarah, I had no idea. Richard always makes it sound like everything's perfect. He doesn't even realize what's happening, Aunt Jean. She's got him so twisted around. Your mother was my best friend before she was your dad's wife. Did you know that? We grew up on the same street. I introduced them. Aunt Jean's voice cracked. She'd be devastated to see what he's become. Will you help me? Tell me what you need. Next, I contacted my mother's best friend Linda. She'd moved to Florida after Mom died, said the city had too many memories, but we'd kept in touch over the years. When I told her what happened, she was ready to go to war. That absolute witch, Linda hissed. Your mother loved that man with everything she had, and this is how he honors her memory, by letting his new wife erase her. I also reached out to some of my father's old friends, the ones from before Patricia, the ones who'd mysteriously stopped coming around over the past few years. Turned out Patricia had been slowly cutting them out too, making plans when they tried to visit, suggesting Dad was too busy when they called, classic isolation tactics. They were all shocked when I told them what had happened, and they were all angry, but my nuclear option, that came from an unexpected source. I was going through old boxes in my apartment, stuff from college, high school, things I'd salvaged from Dad's house before Patricia could donate them, and I found it. My mother's journal. She'd kept a diary for years. I'd forgotten about it, honestly. It was just one of those things that got packed away after she died. But as I flipped through it, my hands shaking, I realized what I was holding. Evidence. Not just of my mother's life, her thoughts, her dreams, but of my father's promises to her. Of the life they'd planned together. Of conversations they'd had about me, about raising me, about the kind of family they wanted to be. In one entry from about a year before she died, Mom wrote, Richard promised me today that if anything ever happens to him, he'll make sure Sarah knows how much I loved her. That he'll keep my memory alive for her. He said our daughter will always know she had a mother who would have moved heaven and earth for her. I made him promise the same. That if something happens to me, he'll make sure she grows up knowing she was the best thing we ever created together. I sat on my apartment floor and cried reading that. My mother and father making promises to each other about me. Promises my father had broken. There were other entries too, about their marriage, their love story, their dreams for the future. My mom had been a beautiful writer. Reading her words, I felt connected to her in a way I hadn't since she died. And I felt a burning need to honor her memory. To fight for her the way she couldn't fight for herself. I made copies of the most significant entries. The ones about family, about promises, about love and loyalty. And then I started planning. My opportunity came sooner than I expected. In mid-December, I found out through Facebook of all places that my father's company was having their annual holiday party. It was a big deal. He'd been going to these parties for 20 years. All his colleagues, his bosses, people he'd worked with for decades. Patricia always went with him, played the role of the perfect corporate wife. I called my father's assistant Margaret. She'd been with the company almost as long as Dad had. I'd known her since I was a kid. Sarah, honey, how are you? I heard about. Well, I heard things got difficult at Thanksgiving. Of course she'd heard. Office gossip travels fast. Margaret, I need a favor, a big one. Name it. Can you get me into the holiday party, as a plus one for someone, anyone? There was a pause. Sarah, your father's going to be there, with Patricia. I know. That's the point. Another pause, longer this time. Then, you know what? Yes, I'll put you down as my guest. Someone needs to shake that man awake, and if anyone can do it, it's you. Plus, I've wanted to tell Patricia what I think of her for about 3 years now. The night of the party, I dressed carefully. Not too formal, not too casual. I wore my mother's necklace, the one piece of her jewelry I'd managed to save. A simple gold locket with a photo of the three of us inside. Mom, Dad, and Tiny Me, all squeezed together and laughing. Jake drove me. He'd offered to come in with me, but I told him this was something I needed to do alone. He parked outside the venue and kissed my forehead. You've got this. You're the strongest person I know. I'm terrified. That's okay. Brave people are always terrified. They just do it anyway. I walked into that party with my head high and my heart pounding. The venue was beautiful, a historic mansion decorated for Christmas, white lights everywhere, elegant jazz music playing. People were already mingling, drinking champagne, laughing. I spotted Margaret immediately. She gave me a subtle nod and a thumbs up, then I saw them. Dad and Patricia were near the bar, talking to a couple I recognized as Dad's boss and his wife. Patricia looked perfect, as always. Red dress, hair done, jewelry sparkling. She was mid-laugh, touching Dad's arm, playing the devoted wife. My father looked older than I remembered, more tired. There were new lines around his eyes. I made my way through the crowd, accepting a glass of champagne from a passing waiter more for something to hold than because I wanted to drink. Several of Dad's colleagues recognized me, did double takes. I'd known many of these people since I was a child. They'd come to my high school graduation, my college graduation. Sarah Mitchell. Oh my God, look at you. That was Tom Chen, one of Dad's oldest work friends. He pulled me into a hug. Where have you been hiding? Your dad never mentions you anymore. Doesn't he? I kept my voice light, but Tom caught something in my tone. His smile faltered. Is everything okay? Actually, Tom, everything's not okay, but it's about to be. I made my way closer to where my father stood. He hadn't seen me yet. Patricia had, though. I watched her face cycle through shock, anger, and then calculation. She leaned in to whisper something to my father. He turned, and our eyes met across the room. The color drained from his face. I walked directly up to them. Patricia's hand tightened on Dad's arm like she was physically restraining him. Hi, Dad, Patricia. I nodded to them both, my voice steady. Sarah, what are you doing here? Patricia's voice was cold. This is a company event. You weren't invited. I'm Margaret's guest. I have every right to be here. I turned to Dad. Can we talk privately? Richard, we're in the middle of a conversation, Patricia started. It wasn't a request for permission, Patricia. Dad, I need 5 minutes, please. The people around us had gone quiet. Dad's boss and his wife were watching with undisguised interest. Office drama is always entertaining when it's not your own. My father looked torn. Sarah, this isn't the time or place. You're right. Thanksgiving dinner at your house wasn't the time or place either, but that didn't stop Patricia from announcing you'd voted me out of the family. So I think here works just fine. Gasps from the people around us. Patricia's face went red. How dare you? How dare I what? Tell the truth. Let people know what you did. I looked around at the gathering crowd. More people were drifting over, sensing something interesting happening. Did you all know that Patricia held a family vote at Thanksgiving dinner? About whether I should still be considered family. And that my father, my voice cracked slightly, but I pushed through, my father voted against me, against his own daughter. The look on people's faces, shock, disgust, confusion. Several people looked at my father with something like horror. Sarah, you're making a scene, Dad said weakly. Good, because for years I've been quiet, I've been polite. I've watched Patricia erase every trace of my mother from your life, from your home, from your memory. I've watched her isolate you from your friends, from your family, from me. And I stayed quiet because I didn't want to make things difficult for you, because I loved you and I wanted you to be happy. Richard, you don't have to listen to this, Patricia hissed, but Dad wasn't looking at her. He was looking at me, really looking at me. And I saw it, a flicker of the man he used to be, the man who was my father. Mom made you promise, I said softly, just to him. Before she died, she made you promise that I would always know I was loved, that you would keep her memory alive for me, that our family, you, me, and her memory would be sacred. His eyes went wide. How do you? I pulled out a folded piece of paper from my purse, a copy of one of Mom's journal entries. She wrote about it, about the promises you made to each other, about the kind of father you swore you'd be, about how I was the most important thing in both your lives. I held it out to him. It with shaking hands. As he read, I watched tears start to form in his eyes. Richard, this is manipulation, Patricia said sharply. She's trying to guilt you with ancient history, I turned to her. My mother died less than 14 years ago. Their marriage lasted 20 years. That's not ancient history. That's his life. That's my life. You don't get to just erase it because it makes you uncomfortable. You need to leave, Patricia said coldly. Security? No. Dad's voice was quiet but firm. No, Patricia, she's not leaving. I need to hear this. Patricia looked like she'd been slapped. Excuse me, Sarah, Dad looked at the paper in his hands, then at me. I broke those promises. I let myself forget what was really important. I'm so sorry, sweetheart. I'm so sorry. Richard, Patricia's voice was shrill now. You're letting her manipulate you. This is exactly what she does, makes everything about her and her dead mother. The crowd around us gasped. Even for Patricia, that was beyond the pale. My father's face changed, something hardened in his expression. Don't, his voice was ice. Don't you dare talk about my wife like that. I'm your wife, you're my second wife, and right now I'm wondering if that was a mistake. He looked at me, really looked at me, and I saw my dad again. Not Patricia's husband. Not Brandon and Melissa's stepfather. My dad, Sarah, I need to talk to you. Really talk. Can we go somewhere quiet? Richard, if you walk away with her right now, you're making a choice, Patricia started. You're damn right I am. Dad took my hand. Come on, sweetheart, let's get out of here. We walked out of that party together, leaving Patricia standing in the middle of the crowd, her face purple with rage. People were already whispering, phones were probably already coming out. This would be office gossip for months. Dad and I ended up sitting in his car in the parking lot. Neither of us said anything for a long moment. I've been an idiot, he finally said. Yeah, you have. Patricia, she got into my head. After your mom died, I was so lost, Sarah, so broken. And Patricia made me feel needed again, made me feel like I could be useful, could fix things. She and her kids were such a mess, and I thought if I could help them, it would give me purpose. So you abandoned your actual child to play savior to someone else's? He flinched. When you put it like that, how else should I put it, Dad? You replaced me. You replaced Mom. You let Patricia turn our home into her home. You let her erase Mom like she never existed. And then, at Thanksgiving, you let her vote on whether I was still your daughter. I didn't think she'd actually. I thought it was just talk, just Patricia being dramatic. I didn't think she'd do it in front of everyone like that. But you went along with it. You voted, Dad. You voted against me. He was crying now, full-on sobbing, his shoulders shaking. I didn't vote against you. I abstained. I told Patricia I wouldn't vote at all, but she counted it as a yes. She said not defending you was the same as agreeing with her. And you let her say that. You let her announce it like you'd agreed. I was a coward. I am a coward. I was so afraid of losing Patricia, of being alone again, that I sacrificed the one person who actually mattered. You, my daughter, your mother's daughter. We sat in silence for a moment. Jake was still in his car across the parking lot. I could see him watching, making sure I was okay. Dad, I need you to understand something. Patricia isn't going to let this go. What happened in there? Her losing control in front of all your colleagues. She's going to make you pay for that. She's going to try to twist this around, make you feel guilty for humiliating her. She's going to use Brandon and Melissa as weapons. And you're going to have to choose. Actually choose this time. I choose you, I choose my daughter. Do you? Because talk is cheap, Dad. You told Mom you'd keep her memory alive, and you sold her jewelry on consignment websites. You told me I'd always have a home with you, and you turned my bedroom into Melissa's photography studio. Your words don't mean anything anymore. Your actions do. He wiped his eyes, nodded. You're right, so what do I do? How do I fix this? I don't know if you can fix it, but you can start by being honest with yourself about what Patricia is. She's not a grieving single mother who needed saving. She's a manipulator who saw a vulnerable widower with money and stability and latched on. She's been systematically isolating you from everyone who knew you before, everyone who might remind you of who you really are. And her kids. They're adults who are bleeding you dry financially while contributing nothing. Brandon has his music. Dad, Brandon is 26 years old. He works part-time at a vape shop. That's not pursuing music. That's being a deadbeat while you pay his bills. And Melissa has dropped out of college twice. When are you going to stop making excuses for them? He sat with that for a moment. Your mother would be ashamed of me. Yeah, she would. But she'd also want you to do better. It's not too late, Dad, but it requires you to be brave, to stand up to Patricia, to set boundaries with her kids, to actually be my father again. I want that. I want to be your father again. I want you back in my life. Then you know what you have to do. We talked for another hour in that car, really talked for the first time in years. I told him everything, every slight from Patricia I'd swallowed, every time I'd felt like a stranger in my own home, every moment I'd wanted to scream but stayed silent. He listened, really listened, and I watched him realize the full scope of what he'd allowed to happen. When we finally got out of the car, he hugged me. A real hug, not the awkward side hug he'd been giving me for years. I love you, Sarah. I never stopped loving you. I lost my way. I love you too, Dad. But love isn't enough. You have to prove it. Jake drove me home that night. I was exhausted, emotionally wrung out, but also hopeful. Maybe I didn't know if Dad would actually follow through, but at least he'd heard me. At least he'd seen the truth. The next morning, I woke up to 17 missed calls and 43 text messages. Most were from Patricia. They started out angry. How dare you humiliate us like that? And you've ruined Richard's reputation at work. Then they turned manipulative. Your father is devastated. Is this what you wanted? And finally, desperate. Richard won't speak to me. What did you say to him? Fix this. I deleted them all without responding. There were also messages from Brandon. You're a selfish bitch and you've always been jealous of our family. And from Melissa, I hope you're happy. You've destroyed everything. The entitlement was almost funny. I'd destroyed everything. I'd been voted out of the family at Thanksgiving dinner, but somehow I was the villain. But there was also a message from Dad. Came home last night and asked Patricia to leave. She's staying at her sister's. We need to talk about everything. Can I call you? I stared at that message for a long time. He'd actually done it. He'd actually stood up to her. I called him back. He answered on the first ring. Sarah, thank God, I thought you might not call. I almost didn't. What happened? After I left you, I drove around for hours. Just thinking, really thinking for the first time in years. And I realized you were right about everything. So I went home and I told Patricia we needed to talk. She immediately went on the defensive, started crying, saying you'd manipulated me, that I was choosing my bitter, jealous daughter over my wife. And I told her that yes, I was choosing my daughter, that I should have chosen you years ago. That our marriage was built on me being weak and vulnerable, and she'd taken advantage of that. She didn't take it well. I'm sure she didn't. She threatened to take me for everything in a divorce, said she'd make sure Brandon and Melissa never spoke to me again, that I'd end up alone. He laughed, but it was hollow. The thing is, Sarah, I realized I'd rather be alone than live the lie I've been living. Over the next few weeks, I watched my father slowly reclaim his life. He filed for divorce. Patricia fought it viciously, of course. Tried to claim she was entitled to half of everything, including the house. But Dad had kept that house in a trust after my mother died, something Patricia hadn't known. It was protected. She was entitled to some assets from the marriage, but not the home, not my mother's house. The divorce was ugly. Patricia told everyone who would listen that Dad had abandoned her for his manipulative daughter. Brandon and Melissa sent me horrible messages, blaming me for destroying their family. Patricia's family tried to rally support, painting Dad as a heartless villain who'd used Patricia and thrown her away. But Dad's real friends, the ones Patricia had isolated him from, came back. They'd heard what happened at the Christmas party. Corporate gossip had spread the whole story, and they rallied around him, reminded him of who he'd been before Patricia, supported him through the divorce. Aunt Jean flew in from Seattle. She and Dad had a long, tearful conversation about Mom, about promises made and broken, about second chances. Linda came up from Florida. She brought photo albums from before Mom died, pictures of our family happy and whole. Dad cried when he saw them. Patricia had made him get rid of all the photo albums, said they were too painful to keep around. The house started to change. Dad took down the koi pond and replanted Mom's garden. He found some of Mom's things that Patricia had donated. Turned out she'd stored them in the attic, probably thinking she could sell them eventually. He gave me Mom's jewelry, her books, her collection of vintage teacups she'd loved. He turned Melissa's photography studio back into my room, not as a guest room, as my room. He called it Sarah's room when he gave me the tour, and I cried. But the biggest thing, he started therapy. Real therapy to deal with his grief over Mom, his guilt over what he'd done to me, his pattern of being manipulated. He wanted to understand how he'd let things get so bad, how he'd lost himself. It wasn't perfect. There were setbacks, times when he'd slip into old patterns, make excuses for himself, times when I'd get angry all over again about what he'd put me through. Healing isn't linear. It's messy and complicated and painful, but we were trying. Actually trying. 6 months after that Christmas party, Dad invited me over for dinner, just the two of us. He cooked badly like always, and we ate at the kitchen table where I'd grown up. I've been thinking a lot about that Thanksgiving, he said. About Patricia standing up and announcing that vote, and I realized something. She thought she was casting me out of a family, your real family. What do you mean? She thought by voting you out, she was establishing her family as the real one. Brandon, Melissa, her, she thought she'd won. He smiled sadly. But she was wrong, because you're my family, Sarah. You're my blood, my daughter, your mother's legacy that can't be voted away. It can be neglected, damaged, almost destroyed, but it can't be erased. Dad, let me finish. I'm not asking you to forget what happened. I'm not asking you to forgive me, though I hope someday you might. I'm just asking for the chance to be your father again, really be your father. To honor the promises I made to your mother, to honor you. I reached across the table and took his hand. I'd like that. It's been a year and a half now since that Thanksgiving dinner. Dad's divorce from Patricia was finalized 8 months ago. She got a settlement, not as much as she wanted, but enough. Brandon and Melissa haven't spoken to Dad since he filed for divorce. They sided completely with their mother, which honestly doesn't surprise me. They'd been living off him for years. Without his financial support, they actually had to become adults. Last I heard, Brandon moved back in with Patricia and is still working at the vape shop. Melissa is engaged to a different guy now, guess Derek didn't work out, and is apparently building her brand as an influencer. Good luck with that. Patricia tried to spread rumors about Dad at his company, but it backfired spectacularly. Too many people had witnessed the Christmas party incident. Too many people had heard her say those awful things. She ended up looking petty and vindictive while Dad came across as someone who'd finally stood up to a manipulative spouse. His reputation, if anything, improved. Jake and I got engaged last month. Dad cried when Jake asked for his blessing. We're planning a small wedding for next fall, just close friends and family. Real family. Dad and I have dinner together every Sunday now. Sometimes we talk about Mom. He tells me stories I'd never heard before. We look through old photo albums. We visit her grave together and tell her about our weeks. He's dating again, casually, nothing serious. But he's different now, more careful, more aware of red flags. He actually asked me to meet his current girlfriend before things got too serious. Her name is Alina, she's a widow too, and she spent the first hour of meeting me asking about my mother, wanting to understand the family she might be joining. Respecting the past instead of trying to erase it. I don't know if Dad and I will ever have the relationship we had before Mom died. Too much has happened, too many scars, but we have something new, something we built from the ruins of what Patricia tried to destroy. And honestly, I think Mom would be proud of both of us. Proud of me for standing up for myself, for refusing to be erased. Proud of Dad for finally finding his way back to the man he used to be. As for Patricia, Brandon, and Melissa, I don't think about them much anymore. They're not worth the energy. They tried to vote me out of a family, but the joke was on them. You can't vote someone out of being a daughter. You can't vote away blood, history, love, and memory. They thought they were establishing themselves as the real family. But real families don't hold votes. Real families don't demand you erase your past. Real families don't make you choose between honoring the dead and pleasing the living. Real families hold space for grief and joy, past and present, memories and new beginnings. And that's what Dad and I have now. Finally. So yeah, my stepmother stood up at Thanksgiving dinner and announced that I'd been voted out of the family. And you know what? It was the best thing that ever happened to me, because it forced my father to see the truth. It forced me to stop accepting scraps of affection from people who didn't value me. It burned down a toxic dynamic and gave us the chance to build something real from the ashes. Was it painful? Absolutely. Was it necessary? Turns out, yeah, it was. Sometimes you have to lose everything to understand what actually matters. Sometimes people have to hit rock bottom before they can start climbing back up. And sometimes the cruelest thing someone can do to you ends up being the catalyst for the change you desperately needed but were too afraid to make yourself. Patricia thought she was destroying me that Thanksgiving. She thought she was winning. But I'm still here, stronger than ever. With my father back in my life, my real father, not Patricia's puppet. With Jake by my side. With a future that doesn't include walking on eggshells or swallowing my voice to keep the peace. And Patricia. She's stuck with 2 adult children who can't take care of themselves, a reputation as the woman who tried to erase her husband's dead wife, and the knowledge that she had it all and lost it because she got greedy. Sometimes karma doesn't need your help. Sometimes it handles things just fine on its own. I hope she thinks about me sometimes. About the daughter she tried to vote out of existence. I hope it keeps her up at night, knowing that her cruelty was the thing that ultimately united father and daughter again. That her greatest victory was actually her biggest mistake. But mostly, I hope she just fades away into irrelevance, because she doesn't get to occupy space in my mind anymore. She doesn't get to be part of my story beyond being the villain who got defeated. My story is about survival, about reclaiming what was taken, about honoring my mother by refusing to be erased. About second chances and forgiveness, the complicated, messy kind that comes with boundaries and conditions and scars that never fully fade. It's been one hell of a journey, and I'm not going to lie and say it's all perfect now. Dad and I still have hard conversations, still have moments where the pain of those years bubbles up, still have to actively work on rebuilding trust. But we're doing the work. Together. And that's something no vote could ever take away. Last Thanksgiving, Dad and I started a new tradition. We volunteered at a soup kitchen in the morning, then came back to his house, our house, and made dinner together, just the two of us cooking Mom's recipes and telling stories. We set a place at the table for her, left it empty but present, acknowledging that she's gone but still part of us, still part of our family. There was no vote, no drama, no manipulation, just a father and daughter grateful to have found their way back to each other. Grateful for the hard lessons that taught us what family really means. And when we sat down to eat, Dad raised his glass in a toast. Not to the meal, not to the holiday, but to Mom, to the promises kept and the ones reclaimed. To the family that couldn't be destroyed no matter who tried. To Elizabeth, he said, his voice thick with emotion. The woman who gave us both life, me through love, Sarah through birth. The woman whose memory brought us back together. We love you, we miss you. And we promise, really promise this time, to honor you by being the family you always wanted us to be. I clinked my glass against his, tears streaming down my face. To Mom. We drank, and in that moment I felt it. Peace. Real, genuine peace. The kind of peace that comes not from avoiding pain, but from walking through fire and coming out the other side. The kind of peace that comes from knowing who you are and refusing to let anyone, not a stepmother, not a manipulator, not even your own fear, take that away from you. Patricia tried to vote me out of my family. Instead, she voted herself out of ours. And honestly, that's the happiest ending I could have asked for.